Good morning, students. Welcome to the subject of business policy and strategy. This is the compulsory subject for BBA SEM 6. Alright, whether you call it business policy and strategy or you call it strategic management, it's almost similar. So this is going to be the first unit that we are going to start today with, that is Introduction to Business Policy and Strategy. Before starting to the whole unit, I would like to say that we have as many as 5 units in the whole syllabus, right? Starting from Introduction to Business Policy and Strategy, we'll move to vision and mission, right? Making the different or formulating the different strategies and framework of the strategies, and likewise, right? So whole of the unit is almost on the basis, or it is a kind of primary introduction to the subject of strategic management that you may have to deal in the, say, masters somewhere, right? So first of all, in this unit, what are we going to do is I have divided this whole unit into 3 parts. That is going to be the business policy as the first part we will be learning, and different aspects related to it, and as far as the business strategy is concerned, that will be the second portion, and strategic management, that's the crux of the whole unit, that will be taking up as the third important area. Now, to start with, if any unit is taking up with the business, then at times normal planning is not enough, right? That means you have to plan out strategically somewhere. તમારે વ્યૂહરચના કરી અને તમારે અમુક સિચ્યુએશન સામે સ્પેસિફિક પ્લાનિંગ કરવું પડતું હોય, અને જે સ્પેસિફિક પ્લાનિંગ છે એને સ્ટ્રેટેજિક મેનેજમેન્ટ કહેવાય, right? But before going to that, first we'll try to introduce ourselves to the basics of the policy and strategy. Let us see it how it goes. There seems a great confusion between the policy and strategy. Some are of the opinion that the policy and strategy are same, and some believe that they are significantly different from each other, right? So policies are defined. What are policies then? Here we will be learning everything related to business policy. So if you are learning business policy, what will be the result, or what we can know about the policy? That they are the kind of general guidelines, right, to the action that outlines the framework within which the objectives are established and strategies are selected and implemented. That means it is such a kind of guideline, or in short we can call it a framework. Like if you are watching any picture, or if you are watching any kind of say landscape, then it has to have its limits. That means it has to be in a frame. If the picture or the photograph is in a frame, it looks better, right? Same way in an organization also, if the policies are such kind of things, or policies are considered to be the guidelines, they give a kind of framework to the organization as to how the organization will come to know as to how they need to work. So business policy is a kind of study of the roles and responsibilities of the top level management. It is the significant issue affecting the organizational success and the decision affecting the organization in the long run. Thus, business policies are guidelines developed by the organization to govern its actions, right? They are defined as the limits within which the decisions must be made. That means if any unit wants to make any kind of decision, then it should know its business policies, right? It should know its terms and conditions. So business policy in short provides a kind of guideline. It is a kind of framework. It also defines the roles and responsibilities of the people working in the organization. Why this is required? Ultimate objective is to achieve the objectives or long-term objectives of the firm, right? Thus, business policy also deals with acquisition of the resources. That means how to acquire the resources to meet the objectives. That is also derived in the policy, or that is also mentioned in the business policy. Thus, policy determines the nature of the firm's involvement with the environment. That means constantly how the firm, or the characteristics of the firm, or the nature of the firm is in involvement with the environment. That is, we come to know with the help of policies of the firm, or maybe we call it business policies. So if we want to remember the business policies quickly, then what we can understand or how we can remember it, those things have been mentioned here. If you see it on the screen there are 5 different points and highlighted differently, so that if you know these points or if you understand these points, ultimately you will understand the business policy well. Thus policies may be related to positioning. Policies કોના related હોઈ શકે? Positioning of the product, operational control, that means whatever the operations are taken up and how to control it, maybe how geographically you want to have the coverage, store size and location, financing, the growth, maybe merchandise means the selling of the product, pricing or advertising of the product, and the promotion. In any ways, in any case, when you want to take up the decisions, it is the policies that you have to understand related to examples that has been given here, right? And if you wish to take any policy action, then if you want to take rather any decision related to whatever has been mentioned here, then we need to undergo the policies, or we need to understand the policy guidelines, we need to understand the framework, and then we can take up the decisions. So if we, in short, if we want to understand policy, then how we'll be able to understand policy? Policy is what? It defines the limit of decision making, number 1. Number 2, describes the guidelines by the organization. Number 3, it helps in the acquisition of the resources to achieve the goals. Number 4, the nature of the firm, what the nature is and what the firm is and how it works, right? And it may cover various issues. That means if you want to understand business policy, just with these 5 points will be clear. It defines the limit of the decision making, right? Number 2, it describes the guidelines by the organization. Number 3, it helps in the acquisition of the resources to achieve the goals. It describes the nature of the firm, and it may cover various issues. We have seen these issues here. See, it may be related to positioning, it may be related to operational control, means any issues that are there in the organization, it may be related to that. So business policies are kind of framework, they are the limit of decision making. So ultimately, if you read the business policy, the employees will come to know, the managerial team will come to know as to what limits they have to follow and within which limit the decisions can be made, right? So it is the limit of decision making. Number 2, it describes the guidelines by the organization. Number 3, it helps in the acquisition of the resources to achieve the goals. Number 4, it tells us about the nature of the firm. Number 5, it may cover various issues, right? So this is all about the business policy. So just remembering these 5 points, we can describe business policies very well. Here few definitions of business policy has been given, like policies are the rules and the guidelines that expresses the limit within which the action should occur. These rules often take the form of contingent decisions for resolving conflicts among the specific objectives. That means, according to James Brian, policies are kind of rules and guidelines. What do? They express the limit within which the action should take place. These rules often take the form of, now these rules are such which will be the base for any contingent decision for resolving or for solving any kind of conflicts among the specific objectives, right? If we go to the next part, business policy defines the scope or spheres within which the decisions can be taken by the subordinates in an organization. That means business policies are such kind of or it mentions such a kind of area or scope within which the decisions can be taken up by the team or maybe the subordinates of the organization. What it does, it permits the lower level management to deal with the problems and issues without consulting top management every time for decision. That means if any requirement is there on the part of lower level management or employees to take the decisions for any kind of problems, then every now and then they don't need to go to the top level management. Instead, just following the policies related to whatsoever the problem or area it is, they can solve the problems or resolve the problems very easily. right? So I think we are clear about the business policy. What is business policy? It defines the limit of decision making. It describes the guidelines by the organization. Number 3, it tells us about the acquisition of the resources. Number 4, it is the nature of the firm. It tells us about the nature of the firm. And next, it may cover various issues, right? So these things are possible with the help of business policy, or business policy in short are these 5 different points. All right, now here we are going to check out with a few of the features of business policy. If you see the bold letters here in red fonts, you will come to know what business policy should be, or how it should be, what should be the characteristics or peculiar features of business policy. Then number 1, it should be specific. That means it should be precise and definite, right? If it is uncertain, then the implementation of the policy becomes difficult. Next is clear. Policy must be unambiguous. That means it should not be confusing. It should be clear cut. It should avoid any kind of jargons or connotations. That means any kind of confusing words or the misleading kind of information should not be there. Next comes up third one, it should be reliable and uniform. That means policy should be reliable throughout for the organization. For each and every member, the policy remains uniform, and policy should be simple and straight, right? You cannot change it from person to person, so it has to be uniform enough so that it can be efficiently followed by all the subordinates from top to bottom. Next comes up appropriate. It should be appropriate in the sense that whatever the organizational objectives or goals are there, it should actually coincide with that. It should not be like this કે ઓર્ગેનાઇઝેશનના ગોલ્સ છે કે ઓર્ગેનાઇઝેશનના પોતાના જે અચીવમેન્ટ્સ છે કે ઓબ્જેક્ટિવ્સ છે, they are different and the policy framework is different. If it doesn't coincide, if it is not appropriate enough, then it will not help us to reach the objective. So it has to be appropriate in nature. Next comes up simple. A policy should be simple and easily understood by all in the organization. That means policy કેવી હોવી જોઈએ? Simple હોવી જોઈએ, અને it should be easily understood, right? It should be very easily understood. એમાં કોઈ complications હોવા જોઈએ નહીં. Next comes up is it should be inclusive or comprehensive. In order to have a wide scope, a policy must be comprehensive. Inclusive means it should include every aspect of the organization, plus comprehensive means it has to be precise and proper, right? So that the because why it should be this? Because the actions depend on this. It tells us about the limit. So if the limit is not clear, if the actions are not are to be clear, then the base has to be clear. So it has to be inclusive in nature, and it has to be comprehensive also, right? Next comes up is flexible. Policy should be flexible in application, right? This does not imply that policy should be altered always. That means a policy once framed should not be altered, but it should be a wide in scope so as to ensure that the managers use them in the routine scenario. Routine scenario માં પોલિસીનો ઉપયોગ થઈ શકે એટલું ફ્લેક્સિબલ તો હોવું જ જોઈએ in its implementation. It cannot be rigid, but that does not mean that you can alter it the way you want to every time, right? So it should be flexible to that extent. Next comes up is policy should be stable, or else it will lead to indecisiveness and uncertainty in the minds of those who look into for guidance. That means it has to be stable, સ્થિર હોવી જોઈએ. પોલિસી વારે વારે બદલીએ, ફ્લેક્સિબલ હોય તો it may be misleading, it may lead to indecisiveness. That means decision લેવાની જે ક્ષમતા છે એ many a times ઘટી જાય, right? So it has to be a kind of stable in nature. Now that we are clear with the business policies, here we are going to see some important functions of business policies, right? When we are talking about what is by now we know what is business policy. It describes the limit, it gives the roles and responsibilities of the employees, it defines the limit, it gives the framework, it guides, it tells us about the resource acquiring of the resource, right? So these many things are there in the business policies. What are we going to study here is that what does it do? That means what important functions does it follow. Then number 1, the important function of the business policy is, number 1, objectives of the company are defined and classified. We know it very well that policies defines, it tells us about where the company wants to go. So objectives of the company are very well mentioned and it performs that function of providing the objectives. Number 2, the planning function is done very systematically, because everything is mentioned properly in the policy. What can be done is, planning function can be taken up systematically and properly. Next comes up is, business policy clearly states the amount of authority that the subordinates have. That means we come to know that what will be the authority, what will be the roles and responsibilities of persons working at each level. So it also specifies the limit of authority of the subordinate. That means ultimately we come to know that this is the limit, this is the framework within which a person needs to work, or he is given the authority to take the decision. Thus it tightens the authority on one hand and provides initiative to the subordinates on the other. That means on one hand it tightens the authority, and other hand it gives the authority to the next person to take the different decisions. In short, it clearly states the amount of authority of each and every person in the organization at different levels. Next, subordinates can use the policy directives intelligently and carefully. Naturally, policy નું કામ જ એ છે કે એ ડિરેક્ટ કરે અને એના એ સબોર્ડિનેટ્સ એનો ઉપયોગ કરીને they work or take the decisions intelligently and very carefully. Next comes up is, it also helps the managerial personnel to perform the functions of control and coordination successfully. With the help of policies, what do we know? We come to know as to how we are going to perform. It is a guideline. So somewhere you keep the parameters of the policies on one side. That means it's like measuring road, and whatever the activities are performed, are they performed according to the policies or not? If you see it and if you check it, then you can coordinate the actions successfully. Next, policy acts as the main foundation for evaluation and determining the quality of action and decisions taken by executives. That means policy acts as the main foundation. It is the main base for evaluation, so that if you are following the policies and you are working accordingly, right, then you can be evaluated on that basis. I told you it is a measuring rod, and it helps to determine the quality of action. So you will come to know whether things are according to the policies or not, and if not, then the the qualitative actions related to it, or maybe the decision making, can be then done accordingly, right? So here a few functions of policies are clear, right? Now if policy is there in an organization and they are clearly mentioned, then it is highly advantageous to the company or organization, because it is very useful for day-to-day and routine types of decisions, right? So what advantages a company gains if it has the business policy clearly mentioned? Number 1, so for in any condition, if you have policies, then it helps to reduce the repetitive work or maybe rethinking of all the factors at the individual, or all the factors by the individual in the individual decisions. That means જે પણ બનેલી ઘટના છે અથવા તો થયેલું છે અથવા તો જે રિલેટેડ આપણે ડિસિઝન્સ લેવાના છે એની ઓલરેડી ગાઈડલાઇન અવેલેબલ હોય તો ઇટ સેવ્સ ટાઈમ. યુ ડોન્ટ હેવ ટુ થિંક એન્ડ રીથિંક, રાઈટ? દરેક વખતે એ પરિસ્થિતિમાં મુકાય તો ઇફ વી જસ્ટ ફોલો ધ પોલિસી, વી કેન કમ ટુ ધ ડિસિઝન્સ ક્લિયરલી or fast or quickly, saving the time, right? So clear policy helps each manager to understand the range within which he can take the decisions. So it is very important that clear policies, it helps the managers that and it guides the manager rather, that in which range he has to take up the decision. Thus feels less uncertain as whether he can give the answers to the subordinates without getting into trouble. That means whenever he wants to answer, whenever he wants to guide his subordinates, then it becomes easy for him to guide, because he has to just follow the policies mentioned already in the organization. So what happens because of that? It becomes less strenuous for him and decisions can be taken without getting into any kind of specific trouble. Next comes up is, because they specify routes towards selected goals, policies helps in evaluating the performance. Naturally, it is a kind of guideline. We have already seen it earlier, right, that it guides the organization, it guides the employees towards the selected goals. So policy helps in evaluating the performance also. So if you follow the policies, your performance can be evaluated like that, and if not, then it may be turning negative, right? So policies are a kind of control guides, or policies are control guides of delegated decision making. That means whatever the decision making is delegated, it helps to control it, because whatever decisions you take, you have to follow somewhere or the other the policies. So it helps to take the delegated decisions properly. Next advantage is, good administration and implementation of policy helps to improve the working environment, and there is a good labor management relationship, because you know how you have to perform. So every now and then you don't have to ask, and everything is lucid, everything is clear and simple. So even the labor, or that means lower level employees or subordinates, will come to know that as to how our management expects us to work. So there is a less conflicts among them, and good labor management relationship can be maintained. The sixth advantage is all about, policy help the firm to clarify the objectives, guide planning for future operations, aid subordinates in reaching the operating decisions, facilitate overall coordination and control, and act as a yardstick for evaluating the quality of executive decision making. Means policies do all these functions. It clarifies the objectives, guides the employees for future operation, even helps the subordinates in reaching some kind of decisions. It facilitates the overall coordination and control. So in short, it's like a yardstick. You have to follow these policies. If you follow the policies, automatic control comes up in the decision making, and all the decisions can be executed well, right? So it is through the policies that the organization's objectives are achieved, better use of resources can be there, social responsibilities can be fulfilled, right? Personal satisfaction is obtained by the employees, and the management is able to take useful and very fruitful decisions. Since policies emanate from the good plans, and since the actual performance of the duties and activities depend upon some means of directing future actions, planning and policies are closely related in the management of an organization. If you have studied somewhere in fundamentals of management, somewhere in the junior classes, that if planning and policies are a very relative term. In fact, policies are a kind of plans, because it guides, and it actually helps day-to-day actions of the employees towards taking up with the different decision making. So this is all about business policies that we have seen here, right, in this session. So in the next session we'll be going with the second part, that is strategy, and then we move on with the strategic management. I think the portion of business policy is clear to you. I repeat that we have taken up, or we have started with the introduction of the policy here, and we are going to go with the strategy, and then at the end we'll be taking up with the next portion, that is strategic management, as the third part of the unit, right? So when we meet next in the next lecture, we'll be taking up with the strategy. Till we meet next, it's a goodbye from my side. Thank you.